Testing, 1, 2. Not sure if everyone heard that, but yes, Zoom says we are recording. So.
Okay, I'll start the meeting. This is Frank Purdy. I own Purdy Group, and we're the folks that are trying to do forest conservation abandonment in this project. The agenda for tonight will quickly cover introductions, Then there are some county required meeting housekeeping tasks that Ann and or Steve will take care of. And then we'll kind of roll into a little quick summary of what we're up to, the bottom line up front, as I call it. And then we kind of open things up for any HOA and or neighbor concerns or comments. And then I will go through the specific forest conservation easement actions that are on the table. After that, and provide rationales. And then after that, we'll have a conclusion and recap. But during the HOA and neighbor comments and concerns, feel free to chime in. And then when I get into the forest conservation easement actions, that will be another opportunity for you to ask questions. And I'll seek comment for each and every action so we can kind of clear the table each time. So with no more delay, again, my name is Frank Purdy. I own Purdy Group, and we own the property that is in question. Ann Mendoza is the hostess of this meeting. She has been primarily the lead civil engineer for this project, and most of the drawings that you've seen are all her work product. Steve Johnson is also part of Ron Johnson and Associates, and has been very insightful for mapping out the strategy, the way forward for this. Also on the phone call is my daughter, Michelle Purdy. She is serving as legal counsel for Purdy Group. And if there are any legal questions that arise, she'll chime in. The next person on Team Purdy is David Plummer. He's a licensed Maryland forester who owns Tupelo Beach Conservation Solutions, I believe is the name. And they're a forestry consulting firm. He has been a Maryland licensed forester for 25 years, 10 years with DNR, and has a lot of expertise in some of the decisions that we've been making for this project. Are there any folks, I recognize several of the names who may be members, but are there any guests who may be representing other organizations or some entity other than themselves? Jesse, could you share with us?
Hi, yeah, thank you, Mr. Purdy. My name's Jesse Iliff. I am the Southwestern Road Riverkeeper. I work with the Arundel Rivers Federation, formerly the South River Federation. We merged with Western Road Riverkeeper Group at the beginning of 2020, and I'm sorry, at the beginning of 2019, and changed our name to Arundel Rivers Federation. But I am here in my capacity as a riverkeeper.
Okay. Well,
We
you're
have
welcome.
one more person joining in.
Okay.
Hello, Frank. We're starting the meeting right now, but you're just in time. If you could include your name, address, email, and phone number in the chat window, so that way we can record your attendance for this meeting. We just went through primary introductions so far, so.
So getting back to the agenda, it's now time for me to hand it over to Ann Mendoza to kind of go through the Anne Arundel County required requirements, mandatory requirements for holding a meeting. So I'll put myself on mute until that's done. Ann, please.
Yes, hi. For those who remember this meeting from 2019, a lot of this wouldn't be any new news, but because this is when the county community meetings, we're going to have to go through the whole list. So we're here today to discuss the Purdy Acres Farm subdivision for the forest conservation abandonment. Part of this is to reintroduce a modification that's going to be done on site, as well as to update the community on the changes that Frank Purdy and the rest of the Purdy group is trying to do for their property. Name and location is Purdy Acres Farms. That's the name of the subdivision. It's located along Deer Walk Lane, hopefully to be renamed as Purdy Acres Farms Lane. This is a private residential project. The owner is Purdy Group LLC, which is owned by Frank Purdy and his family. The zoning of the property is RA, that is rural agricultural. There is no critical area designation for the site. The property itself is 5 single lots of development potential. We've already applied for a grading permit to construct a single family residential home for Frank Purdy, who's already living on site. As well for the this grading permit also includes 3 other lots, lot 1, 2, and 3. This has already been approved by the county. Because all this is for the amended plat, there are no new development that's going to be occurring for this for the subdivision. So no new development techniques, no new lots. All these are residential, but there's no changes in the residential designation for these lots. No new open space, and no new design criteria that's going to be necessary for this. Because this is for the amended plat and no new lots are being created, there's not really any new impact to schools besides what's already being designated for the site. Elementary schools are Davidsonville Elementary School, Central Middle School, and South River High School. So the elementary school and the high school are open for the utilities. Everything is being served by private well and septic. And the reason why we're all here is to show you guys the changes that's happening with the forest conservation easement abandonment and the proposal for some additional areas to be included for that forest conservation. Modification will have to be reapplied for. And this is one of the items that this kind of meeting is for. So that is pretty much just the nitty gritty of all the information that we can provide for you so far. Oh, and we have one more, so. Not seeing Linda's. I just end up missing someone while I was going through all the boilerplate items. So her name was Linda, but I'm not seeing her icon anywhere on in our little grid. Yeah, so there you are. Hello, Linda Meyer. My name is Ann Mendoza. I am an engineer on this project. If you can include your name, address and email and phone number into the chat, that would be greatly appreciated. I just went through the boilerplate items that's also included in the community meeting notice that was included with the meeting ID for this meeting.
Okay, Ann, I think it's time for me to get into things. Do you agree?
Yes.
Okay, so I'd like to provide the bottom line up front for everyone. The landowner of this project is Purdy Group LLC, but we are not developers. This is a family compound. We have 5 buildable lots in this subdivision, and they're all meant to be privately held by the Purdy family. The subdivision, it has 5 lots, but we also have purchased an adjacent lot to our subdivision, and the total land mass is 74.5 acres. And the goal was to start building houses with family members, but due to the pandemic and the rising price of things, that has kind of put family plans on hold. So we are shifting gears to phase 2, which was always part of the plan, was to create and maintain an operational farm. So what we are actually trying to do is reshape the functionality of the property by eliminating 1.1 acres of real tangible trees but in so doing, we're offering the county much, much more. So our 2019 previous forest conservation easement abandonment request was originally to decrease the tree stands by 2.93 acres approximately. We've re-wickered that, we've reevaluated wants versus needs, and we're down to 2.1 acres, which is basically a 28% reduction. Now, in return for being allowed to reshape 1.1 acres of real actual trees, Purdy Group has offered additional lands that are not covered by forest conservation easement to offset the removal of some trees and the replacement of those trees with mature forest. 2 years ago, we offered 2 additional areas. And would it be appropriate to put up maybe the graphic so I can kind of speak to things?
Sorry, I did not realize I cut my mic off. Yes, I could share my screen with you all.
Yep. So, and I'll just kind of talk through things off this screen.
Hopefully everyone can see this well. This graphic will also be included with this graphic will also be included in the minutes summary that will be sent out after the meeting is done.
Is there a way to make it a little bit larger, Anne?
Let's see.
Okay. Well, and so back in 2019, you'll notice that Ann has kind of kept things festive with the red and green highlights for the season. If you'll look at the 2 green splashes at toward the bottom of the page, those were areas of our compound that are not forested that we were using to pay back the forested areas that we sought. Now, we've added a 3rd area to that. If you'll look, it's the green shaded area to the left. So we're adding back additional areas A, B, and C as suitable replacements of mature forest for the forest conservation abandonment. Now, the net result of Purdy's decreases to the 2019 abandonment request, plus the swaps of these 3 green shaded wooded areas, equates to 0.38 acres of additional forest conservation easement over what we're taking away. Again, the original request was for 2.1 acres of abandonment, but we are replacing it with 2.486. So now, again, I'd like to remind you that it's not really 2.1 acres because part of that, about an acre of it, is actually 100-year-old pasture. So the county, for letting us reshape 1.1 acres, they get 2.5 back of mature wooded forest, which is a 226% increase. David Plummer, who's our licensed Maryland forester, wrote a report, and in that I'm going to quote that in order to operate a farm and maintain livestock, oh, by the way, Purdy Group wants to do beef cattle. That's the purpose for some of this, most of this forest conservation abandonment. But in order to manage livestock, there are certain requirements for maintenance, machinery and buildings, fencing, infrastructure like water lines, troughs, gates, feeding areas, etc., all of which must be considered as part of the animal welfare of an operation. It's and we've noticed this. It's difficult to plan for all aspects of the challenges that farmers face, but we are trying to make the adjustments necessary to ensure a successful farming operation. While the value and benefit of local food production may not supersede forest protection, it is more than justified given the current request for abandonment, especially when we're giving back more acreage than we're asking for. So that's kind of the bottom line up front. And so we have requested some comments and from HOAs and others. Their Governor's Bridge HOA asked that they had some concerns about the cutting of trees on lot 3, which is that little red skinny triangle on the right-hand side of the graphic. They were worried that that may impact the view from their subdivision, which would be in the lower right-hand corner of the graphic. They're a neighboring subdivision. And we, as part of the reevaluation, we went from 0.445 acres, less than half an acre, down to 0.166 tenths of an acre. So we reduced that footprint by 63%. And the trees that we're looking to reduce are shorter in nature. They're newer trees below the mature tree canopy. The reason we shaved some of this off was because there are specimen trees that are, my understanding of a specimen tree is a tree that is sufficiently old and well developed. Some of those trees in there are 40 or 50 inches around, and the county wants to protect those. And so we've adjusted our plan to not take so much land out of forest conservation to protect some of those specimen trees. Now, with regard to Governor's Bridge HOA concern, there's over 600 feet of forest between where those trees would be cut and the nearest border to your community. So we don't think that shorter trees being cut would pose an issue. Now, there were some other concerns that we heard, I believe, from folks who live in Gravely HOA. There was a question about the removal of trees in lot 5 along our driveway. And could you kind of circle where I'm talking about with your, yeah, right there. So the FCE abandonment area 5B, there was a comment that I heard that was concerned about the potential negative effects of any runoff from those trees being cut. Our goal there was to kind of replace old junk trees. There's nothing significant in there with regard to specimen trees or anything of value, but and replant it with a orchard of we're kind of evaluating whether we're going to go chestnuts, walnuts, fruit trees, or even pawpaw. We have quite a few stands of pawpaw growing on our property, and we were thinking we could bring some of that closer to a more viable farm option. Now, David Plummer, again, our Maryland licensed forester, said that regarding the environmental impacts related to this area being converted to open field or an orchard, in addition to the concerns about watershed and local stream impacts, the conversion of this forest to agricultural use will change the habitat conditions in favor of livestock over wildlife, but it will not necessarily create any impacts to local streams or the watershed as a whole. If you remember, maybe in the intro for David, he did have extensive involvement with watershed studies. So we feel that that's a very valued opinion. And David also stated a well-established and maintained pasture will provide very similar water retention, infiltration, nutrient and sediment filtering, and water velocity control as a forest would. The key will be to get the stand of grass growing on the clear area as soon as possible, and Purdy's dedicated to do that. Furthermore, any watershed/local stream impacts created by the abandonment are far outweighed by the additional acreage of mature forest being added to the easement. Again, we're trying to cut down 1.1 acres of real trees in trade for 2.5 acres of mature trees, 100-year-old forest. Many of these additional forest areas are located, many of the 2.5 acres of additional forest are located on steep slopes, which adds more to the watershed protection quality. David also stated there is no indication that this abandonment proposal will in any way harm water quality or have any impact on downstream neighbors. Most of the abandonment sites are surrounded by lush, dense pasture that will buffer and absorb any potential runoff. The abandonment areas near the house and barns are located on very flat terrain surrounded by yard, pasture, and a storm water management structure. So that is that's our assessment of that area in answer of the Gravely question. There was another Gravely HOA question that dealt with if you'll look at the bottom of the page, the forest conservation add area, the larger green area right there. There was a question about aerial views, aerial photographs showing that that was not well forested, that there were.
Frank, if you don't mind, I actually have that comment up as a slide. Laura Mulvaney from the Gravely property actually included that to an email to me earlier today, if you don't mind comparing the aerial to what's provided here.
Sure.
All right. So hold on, let me stop sharing for a second and then provide a new share for this area here. So this is provided to us by another one of your community members and and one of the GIS engineers, I believe she said. She was part of the restoration group that's working with the stream between Gravely and the Purdy property.
Okay. This is my first time seeing this, and I see what she's talking about. I don't, I haven't seen that mapped out in real life on the property. The wooded areas are mature trees, 80 to 100 years old or more, and I would have to look at this closer to see what portion of that. We may not be able to account all of that add back area for this if the measurements prove to be that it's not a forested area. So this is new information, and we'll look into it further. Yeah, about her comment about reforesting it, I'm not sure if that's our only option. We may have other ways to address some of the difference in that. So we'll just have to look into it and we'll talk about it. So those are the community comments that we've received so far. And were you aware of any other community comments prior to this meeting?
As far as I have recorded, we have addressed most of them. I think, Jesse, I think I was the one who you talked to back, I think on, I have here back on the 15th, is that correct?
That sounds about right, a few days ago.
Yeah, so if you have any additional ones, hopefully we satisfied that comment by you from that phone call, but we will be opening up to other community questions very shortly.
Okay, so what I think a good use of our time is, I wanted to then go into each of the proposed forest conservation actions and provide the rationale for them. And I'd like you to go back to the graphic as well, to the plan.
All right.
So Anne, I'm going to go through them abandonment areas first, starting with lot 1. And yeah. So the item that you see in red is abandonment area number 1A. Back in 2019, it originally was 0.085 acres, so just under 1/10 of an acre. and we cut that almost by half and the goal here was to create an internal path between our subdivision and then the lot that we purchased right next to it. Otherwise, we would have to exit our property, go onto the county cul-de-sac, and then drive up that path to access the adjoining property. We started out with, I think, a 50-foot wide path request and narrowed it down to 35 feet. And the reason for that is we're trying to accommodate, I have 2 tractors. We're trying to accommodate towing large trailers or implements like hay wagons, multiple horse trailers. And there's just not enough room to maneuver given the sharp corners that you see and obstacles like property boundary lines, the neighbor's existing fence, some old tree stumps, and then there's a little bit of hilly terrain that would make it kind of unsafe and create a tipping hazard. So the items that are there, the trees that are there, and the undergrowth that we're targeting for removal are saplings that are low quality, and it's just overrun with invasives, vines, and poison ivy and such. So I don't know if there's any questions, but we're trying to create a path from the 72 acres leading to the 2.1 acres next adjoining to us. Does anybody have any concerns with that request or questions about it? If not, I'd like to move on to abandonment area 1B. Ann, if you could take us to that. Now that original, so this is our largest abandonment request. Originally back in 2019, originally back in 2019, it was 1.32 acres. We've since lowered it by 12% to 1.15 acres. And the intent here is to ensure that we maintain pasture that already exists. You'll see a little bit, you'll see the bulk of the property. And if you could just kind of take your thing and circle around it. The piece that looks like a tip of a banana on the red section, that has been pasture for over 100 years because we have aerial photograph proof that it's been a maintained pasture for over 100 years. And when you look at what we're trying to take out of the, we're just trying to take it out of the forest conservation easement program. That parcel that looks like the tip of a banana is approximately 1 acre, and it's just under half of our total forest conservation abandonment request. Now, by and large, we're trying to offer the property to the left of that, the property in green, as a swap. That is mature forest, 100-year-old forest with specimen trees that is not in forest conservation easement that we are willing to dedicate to the forest conservation program so that we can keep perfectly good pasture and as pasture. And so that is something we're trying to do here. Let me see, I'm just trying to read my notes. So again, the majority of the property that is not pasture that would be subject to removal is not high quality forest, and it has no specimen trees and relatively little other value. We'd like to convert that little red tip to the right hand side of that into pasture as well, so it can kind of connect and not create a choke point between the road and the pasture. Are there any questions or concerns about what we're trying to do for this area 1B abandonment? If not, I'd like to move on to abandonment area 3A, which we already talked about a little bit, which is that little skinny red triangle. back in 2019, we were seeking, like I said, almost a half acre of forest conservation abandonment. And we've cut that by 2/3 roughly. And part of the rationale for that is there are a few specimen trees that are in there that are documented 150 to 200 years old. And we didn't think it was wise to convert that to pasture for any viable farm purpose. Are there any questions about that request and what we're trying to achieve there? If not, I'd like to move to abandonment area 5A. 5A is a little sliver of forest conservation easement abandonment. We originally started out with 2/10 of an acre there, but we have cut that by over half to 8/10 of one, or I'm sorry, not 8/100ths of an acre. What we are trying to do is, what's not depicted on here is a 100-year-old tobacco barn that has a door that leads out of it on the west side. And so with a tractor towing a farm implement, and what also is not depicted is a stormwater management device, a biopond, that we're trying to avoid as well by creating this little sliver of land so that we can drive our tractor out and make the requisite 90-degree turn while towing mowers and things like that. So we started off with I think a 30-foot exit path, and we've narrowed it to a 15-foot wide exit path to accommodate some concerns and observations. The brush and the trees that are in there are, maybe 2, 3, 4 inches in diameter. They're very young growth, and there's nothing of any quality there. Are there any questions about that request? If not, go ahead.
I was going to say, Steve and I both have a lot of runoff coming from that area on your farm. And we were a little concerned that if that was removed, we would have more runoff coming into our personal property.
Okay. And you still have issue with the runoff because that's right where the biopond is located.
I still have some, but Steve had put rocks in there and it had diverted the flow. But I still have a rut in my backyard that gets filled up every time it rains.
Okay.
There's also silt in the front yard, but I don't know if that's, or the front of the driveway, but I don't think that's got anything to do with that piece of land.
Right. I understand. Okay. Well, we taking a 15-foot swath out of there, I don't think would create more of a, I don't think it would exaggerate what you're experiencing, but we can look at it and get a professional opinion on that.
Okay.
I also would like to point this out as well. Earlier, when we sent out the community meeting notices, we did include a preliminary exhibit of the forest conservation abandonment. We actually have changed that. Before, the abandonment around this area was going around 8,000 square feet, and we reduced it greatly by trimming down the abandonment width here from about like 30 or so feet to only 15. Before, this width was hitting about 35 feet towards the property line. Now you have about 51 linear feet between any of the trees being cleared out to the property line. So hopefully that'll help out a little bit more with the drainage issue.
And can you zoom out? I'm not even 100% sure I understand what area we're talking about.
I am so sorry.
Eric, is this the area where I put the rocks?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'll just add the runoff is significant. I mean, it looks like Whitewater Rapids, or it did before I put the rocks in. And that was an area I had to replace the driveway to the tune of about $3,000 because of the water damage there. So I think the current level of runoff, unless something has changed I'm not aware of, is probably unacceptable, and certainly any more would be not good for both Eric and our property.
Understood.
Just to understand, what type of rocks did you put in, just so that I can understand what you did and
I'm
so
no rock expert, but I believe the technical term is like riprap or something like that.
okay.
Yeah,
And
I'll
you
agree.
said that it did help.
I don't know, to be honest with you. And Eric's property turns into swampland, it looks like to me. I was just trying to protect more damage to the driveway.
Yeah.
And then to echo Eric's point, there is a significant amount of sediment that builds up at the end of Swan. Mostly, I think, in front of my driveway, but in front of Eric's property as well. That's been going on for decades. I don't know if it's gotten any better or worse, but
Okay.
and I'm not sure that's completely from the Purdy property either.
Yeah. But the rocks help. Like, why did the rocks help? Like, just they stopped the rainwater from flowing?
It
I was just trying
rediverted
to-
it from,
Yeah, I was just trying to slow down the. I mean, I got video I can show you, and it was video taken after the rain had stopped, and it was still flowing like crazy. I was just trying to. I figured rocks would slow it down a little bit.
Okay.
I didn't
Okay.
consult any experts or anything like that.
Yeah,
I'm
we
just
could-
trying to think if there are things that we could do that might, if there are things that we could, like if we could put rocks on our land in between or something that might, like, because we already put in the drainage pond, but if there are things that we could do that might, help you, but also help us, because
I
just
see
the
Jesse
ball here.
raising his hand,
Yeah.
so I'm gonna unmute him if I can click.
Hey, thanks. And yeah, Ms. Purdy, to your kind of observations there, is there anything that might be done upstream and things like that? I think that's, from my take on the conversations I've had with folks in the community there's sort of an equal split in terms of broad ecological concerns about forest conservation swaps and then specific impacts of specific parcels. And I think, part of the reason that this abandonment area 5A is specifically concerning is because it is a little forest buffer area between the downstream parcels. And I think, and maybe this is a better question for Mr. Johnson, but the infiltrative capacity of that little stretch of trees, I think it's fair and reasonable to weigh that infiltrative capacity against the infiltrative capacity of a pasture area. And it may go a long way to alleviating community concerns, to be able to demonstrate in some sort of technical sense that stormwater management practices installed upstream will have a similar infiltrative capacity to the trees that are there currently.
Mhm.
So that's just a comment and observation, generally speaking.
I can go briefly into that since I was the one who designed the infiltration device on Lot 5. Once we go over that last forest conservation abandonment area, I can go into a little bit more detail about that.
So I'll take that as a cue to get into forest conservation abandonment area 5B. This is the one that we talked about earlier, that it started out in 2019 as 0.529 acres, just a little over half an acre. And we have increased that by 23% to 0.654 acres. This area is overrun with low value junk trees, several of them dead, overrun with invasive vines, poison ivy, briars and such. And this was the area that we were trying to convert into an orchard with fruit trees or chestnut, walnut, or pawpaw even. Now, people have commented that or recommended that, why don't we do this orchard somewhere else on the property? We have, 36 acres of pasture and 39 acres of woods. Why do I need to take this area out? Well, what you have to also realize is that we have this desire to raise beef cattle and to live with an overrun bramble that is providing more harm than good to the farm operation. It's not worth planting an orchard somewhere else that takes away land for good pasture and or affects the future subdivision development. So we have 5 home sites that are already mapped out where they go, and you just can't plop an orchard anywhere you want. So we think that this is the best area. And although these are part of that 1.1 acres of real trees, they are really just junk, useless trees. And again, probably a good 25% of them are dead. And we're just trying to create something that's functional and usable for farm operations. So that kind of covers the abandonment request side of it, except that there were 3 or 4 other parcels back in 2019 that we requested to abandon. We reevaluated our priorities, found those parcels to be low priority. And so we just walked away from 0.35, a third of an acre of request, and just said, it's not worth it. We don't hold those parcels in that high of esteem. So going back to the green areas, the add back areas, we're looking to provide that much more acreage back in return. So I'm going to just kind of conclude a little bit of what we talked about and then open things back up. So again, the landowner, Purdy Group, not a developer, just somebody trying to create a family compound. We own 74.5 acres of land that's already been subdivided, but we want to make into an operational farm. And what we're actually trying to do is eliminate 1.1 acres of real touchable trees and reshape the functionality of the property so that we can create an operational farm. We've decreased our original ask from 2.9 acres down to 2.1, and we're giving back almost 2.5 acres of mature trees to compensate. Now, again, we have to look into that additional area A because we just got new aerial information, but I didn't know that before this meeting. And so our intent was to give the county almost 4/10 of an acre more than we were taking out of the area. Now, we've worked very extensively with David Plummer, Tupelo Beach Conservation Solutions, and we really have scrubbed the amount of land that we're looking to do forest conservation easement on. And we've tried to maximize parcels of land that would be valuable to the county. I don't remember whether it's 7, 8, or 9 specimen trees, like big ones, 40 to 60 inch around trees that we're adding back into the mature forest, to the forest conservation easement. And we're trying to give the county equal and or better forest for what we're proposing taking out. Now, that's kind of what we're trying to accomplish. Does anyone else have any observations or concerns or questions about our intent or the mechanics of what we're trying to do?
Jesse has a question.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Ann. kind of in the same vein as what I was saying earlier, I had seen that same slide about the FCE area ad A, and how the aerial imagery seemed to indicate that it might not all be forested. I appreciate your attention to that detail and the willingness to look into that further, because I think at bottom, what my sense of a lot of community concerns was that, okay, the Purdy group is basically proposing a trade here of areas currently in forest conservation for areas that are not. And what would the ecological cost benefit analysis of that be? And then also, with respect to Mr. Lambert and what was it, Mr.
Stephen
Quinn?
Quinn was.
Yeah, they have specific concerns related to their property, and then, as you know, because of my letter from a couple year and change ago, there is a stream restoration project immediately downstream that would be receiving all the runoff from these, well, maybe not all, but a lot of the runoff from all these areas proposed for being abandoned, perhaps all. So I think that your family's, Mr. Purdy and Ms. Purdy, your family's attention to those details and any additional information you're able to provide about the health of these forests. And I don't know if Mr. Johnson has prepared a report on this or anything. With typical land development, there is a forest stand delineation and forest conservation plan that's required and things like that. I'm not sure whether that's required for the abandonment of an FCE, perhaps not, but Mr. Purdy, you mentioned that there were a certain number of specimen trees that are going to be kind of added into the equation with this proposal. And I think those sorts of details will really be very salient to community members as you move through this process. And the more meat you can put on the bones of the idea that all in all, this will be an environmental win, the easier I think your application review will be. Because go ahead, sorry.
And to that point, I mean, we are concerned about not creating any negative environmental impacts. We do have this business imperative to run an operational farm, but we're not trying to create any problems for the environment or our neighbors, Eric Lambert or Mr. Quinn. So we would be open to looking into mitigation approaches for that little, I think it's the 5A, that little sliver, so that it doesn't create such a runoff potential hazard. But and I'm not this guy, I'm not that kind of person, but the areas in green could all be they could just be cut down, and I could convert that to pasture if I wanted to, because it's not in forest conservation easement. And so I'm trying to give more than I'm asking for. Again, it's only 1.1 acres of real trees compared to originally 2.4 acres of mature forest. Again, I have to look at the additional area A, but we're trying to do the right thing. And so one of the big takeaways for my neighbors and for the community at large is that I don't want to give up an acre of pasture that's been there for 100 years if I don't have to. And I don't want to cut down 2.4 acres of mature forest if I don't have to. I'm trying to, balance the two priorities. So I think it's meant to be a win-win for everyone, and the concerns expressed are important, and we're taking them serious. We will remeasure the additional add area A to get that number right. And I would be open to looking at options for mitigating the runoff flow on that abandonment area 5A. Maybe there's a berm or that could be put up, or maybe there's that's black fencing or something that could slow things down. I'm not sure what the options are or what the best approach is, but I'm open to exploring that and making a win-win solution for everyone.
I also want to give a general input from an engineering standpoint. Jesse, for your question about having a forest stand delineation plan for the amended plat, yes, we have included a forest stand delineation with the report provided by David Plummer. So that, we will have that forest stand delineation because the report was already done. We just didn't have the stand plots plotted onto the actual plans as you would see on this type of PDF. So that will be provided to the county, and then you could actually see where the specimen trees are in regards to where it was in the report. For the infiltration device, at least for lot 5, I was the engineer that did the calculations for the stormwater management. I based it off of the development that was happening for Mr. Purdy's residential home. But the way that I usually do for my stormwater management devices is go through what's called for the rest of the community. I use the program what's called TR55, which will help measure the flow coming from a 10-year storm or a 100-year storm. Those stormwater managements are meant to cover for the 10-year storm. And the area has been graded so that way there's a gentle slope coming from in between the Purdy's homestead and their garage, and a slow grade that's going into that stormwater management device. As for the concerns for if it's coming from the original subdivision, from the existing road, I will evaluate that a little bit further to see if it can take on the rest of that capacity. But also with the reassurance of Frank Purdy about having an orchard also on lot 5, that would also help the runoff that would be coming from that road.
Thanks for that additional detail, folks. I had a question, Ms. Mendoza, about something you just said, how there is a stormwater BMP already kind of in the area of maybe in between 5A and 5B. Sorry, I'm squinting to see the PowerPoint or the
Sorry,
PDF.
I didn't realize I'm still sharing screen, but that's actually pretty perfect.
Okay.
So the original area is around, sorry, that's a little bit too much. The original farm, original barn is located somewhere around here going along the parallel of this forest conservation. The stormwater management that we end up grading where the house and the garage and where the garage was. There is a swale that's going along the forest conservation easement line, with the device being somewhere around here. The main reason that the Purdys want to abandon part of this is the fact that there's no straight line coming from the barn area coming out to the rest of their fields. And that was one of the issues that they had, especially that we were kind of limited on space for how we were going to do the drainage for the stormwater management device. So hopefully this is a little bit more of a general pictorial of what was going on for that grading permit.
Yeah, that helps, but it raises the question in my mind about whether and how much runoff enters that stormwater practice from abandonment area 5B. And I don't have a pictorial memory of this this drawing, but I guess my point is, you engineered this to 10 and 100-year storms based off of the conditions on the land when Mr. Purdy's residence was built. And is there any accounting for the changes in the catchment that goes into that BMP if these conservation easements were to be awarded?
So most of this ends up being that I designed the BMP device to be much greater than to be much greater than the original grading permit would be holding. Now for the forest conservation, I haven't gone that far deep into the computations for the abandonment, but through what I've seen from TR 55 calculations, by converting most of the area into pastures, that ends up creating a better runoff curb number, or an RCN, for the runoff to be absorbed into the soils rather than through the trees. It's not a perfect system, and that's probably something that would have to be reevaluated in the future. But at least it's not, the complete abandonment of these trees is not like, it's not like you're abandoning it and paving it over. At least there's some absorption coming from the soils coming around once it's converted to pasture.
Okay, thank you for that. I don't want to totally dominate questions here, but I did just have one or two others. You know, I understand that Mr. Johnson, your forester, has you know, considered this proposal and concluded that there is no indication of that it will cause harm to water quality or impacts to downstream property owners. And I wondered if he or you or anyone could address a little bit how, I mean, there is certainly a difference in terms of the infiltrative capacity of water, the nutrient uptake, or I'm sorry, the infiltrative capacity of forests and the nutrient uptake of forested land versus pasture land or hay crop. And I you know, use Chesapeake assessment scenario tool figures in the letter that I sent about this, you know, previously. And I wonder if and how that's been accounted for. I mean, if you are reforesting, for instance, area 5A, or I'm sorry, 5B, to put into an orchard sort of area, you know, you can't plant 50-year-old trees. So it's going to take some time for those to reach a sort of maturity and the nutrient stormwater infiltrative capacity that existing trees have, even if, and I've seen this spot, you know, there's a lot of vines overrunning some of those trees and so forth. But there are some substantial ones in there too. And I wonder if there is some sort of accounting in Mr. Johnson's calculation for the time that it takes for trees to reach a similar size and have the same ecosystem services.
Well, actually, I think that's better addressed by the forester, David Plummer. I don't know if he's still on the call.
Yeah, Frank, I'm here. I don't know. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
So there's no question that some of the larger trees in section 5B, there are some walnuts in there. There's a couple of black locusts that don't look great. There's also some tree of heaven and some other invasive stuff. The larger trees provide some protection in regards to rainfall that probably an orchard would not. There is nutrient uptake as well. The areas surrounding 5B, if they're in pasture, the possibility of nutrient runoff, I think, is quite reduced. Now, obviously, Mr. Purdy introduces animals to the site. He'll have a nutrient management plan, and there will be concerns with animal waste, et cetera, et cetera. But all those things will be accounted for as we figure out, or as he figures out, where the cattle will be, the management of the barnyard, et cetera, et cetera. So some of my comments that I provided were in regards to water flow and the differences between a forest versus a well-maintained pasture. The nutrient uptake will certainly vary, and large trees and the spongy understory that's created in a mature forest has benefits. But one of the things that I observed, and looking at this on a specific site in the area that we're talking about here that we're zoomed in on is one thing, but the watershed benefits with I think it's the big green area that is being converted.
I can zoom out
There's
and-
also some, zoom out. Yeah, that area. I forget what you refer to that as. The size of that and the location and the slopes, et cetera, there. The watershed benefits versus of clearing that instead to achieve pasture or open land would certainly be more detrimental than the forest that's under Area B. My observations from being in that forest was it was fairly flat. It's full of invasives. So it didn't, from a forest, strictly from a forest standpoint, it didn't represent a very valuable forest when compared to the data and information that I gathered from these other, particularly that large area that's being given over in lieu of. One of the questions I have about the water flow from Mr. Quinn and Mr. Lambert is, how long has this water flow issue been a problem? I assume it's been going on for much longer, even than Mr. Purdy's been involved in the site.
Yeah, that's correct.
Go ahead, Steve.
Oh, so yes. I don't know, you see it more than I do, but yeah.
Well, the part in the backyard where I got the rut is pretty much, I think, since more's been cleared over there. All the rest in front of the house and everything has been there for a while.
So there was water flow issues previously already, and you guys are worried that it's going to make it
Well,
more.
there were some, but it seemed like it did get worse over the last couple of years, over the last year. When Steve took that video, it was pretty bad. Was that year before last? I don't remember when that was, Steve.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure it's timestamped. I don't know off the top of my head.
Well, and so one of the things, just to add, one of the things that we did when I went out there and inventoried and took a look at things, Mr. Purdy had been looking for a much larger area there adjacent to the property I think that you guys are referring to. And I noted to him that there were some larger trees close to the property line, and that there was also a screening issue. So he reduced that, I think, as much as he could, and still with still having the capacity to be able to get equipment moved around. I think that's his main issue. I guess part of my question is, it seems like the stormwater facility or something like it could probably be used to address the concerns that it sounds like the community has.
So
I'm open
this,
to anything.
so
Could I
I'm,
answer- Yeah, go ahead.
you know, I'm not an engineer or anything like that, but I'm sure there are techniques, whether it's a shallow berm or some kind of French drain or some kind of tie-in to the existing stormwater management. I believe there are steps we could take to mitigate the force and the volume of runoff so it doesn't adversely impact the neighbors, Quinn and Lambert. So I just don't know what those options are, but I am interested in reviewing them and seeing what we need to do to get this approved. And we'll take the requisite actions that are reasonable that we can take.
The other thing about the Area 5B is, with it being isolated, in my opinion, it has much less value than the larger areas that are being offered up. Having to go in and remove the trees from one of those other areas, just from a pure community and forest standpoint, would be more detrimental than clearing this block of fairly low value invasive species, just from a holistic standpoint. Now, that's notwithstanding the water runoff issues that you all have experienced in the community. So I completely get that. Yeah, you want to make sure that that doesn't in any way increase due to the removal of the trees.
That's the only thing I'm concerned about.
So if I may be bold enough to ask Eric and Steve, if we are able to mitigate that runoff, do you have any other reservations about what Purdy Group's trying to accomplish here? If we correct that abandonment 5A issue and its impacts on you guys?
I have no problem.
Yeah, not at this time. I guess I'm still not 100% clear with that. So the use of that area is going to be for heavy machinery?
No. The barn, the 100-year-old barn that's there now, the door on the eastern side, the way the subdivision was laid out, it's given the location of the door and the fact that I want to be able to drive. See, right now I can't go from the cul-de-sac side of my barn and drive through my barn out to the eastern side of my barn, because you have forest conservation protected areas like 15 feet, 10 feet from my 10-foot barn door. So yeah, I can open my barn door, but I can't get the tractor out and drive out of my barn, because it butts right up against these scraggly forest conservation easement junk trees. So I'm just trying to create a 15-foot path that that gives me enough ability to maneuver out of the barn and around the current stormwater management pond so that I can drive my tractor. And I know that a lot of people don't know about driving tractors, but they're hard to turn around when you're towing something. And I'm just trying to create an easy path to exit my barn.
Okay, got it. Yeah. Yeah, the runoff, the water runoff would be the main concern there.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll be exploring more of those options, but right now this plan is meant to just figure out what is agreeable to all parties involved, including the comments that came from you guys, including the county comments, and of course, what the Purdys need for their property. So right now, once we can figure out what's comparable for everyone, then we can go through for the rest of these steps. If it's required to have the forest conservation plan, if we're going to have to reevaluate the stormwater management, we'll proceed with those steps after the amended plat.
Unless there's any other questions or concerns, that's all I have.
All right, we opened the floor for Q&A. It is 7:49. I know this is running a little bit long, but we want to make sure that all these issues have been addressed.
I think we're good. We can probably close the meeting.
All right. Jesse, yes. Oh, and Karen.
I was just waving goodbye.
Okay.
And I was just going to say thank you.
Right. Well, my phone number is listed on the little lower third. If you guys have any more questions, this video will be submitted tomorrow, and we'll be able to send out the rest of the community meeting minutes once the county has their review, and there will be a 2-week comment period for you guys to go through all that, and then we'll be able to send out the meeting minutes. So thank you for everyone in attendance. And if you have any more questions, just let us know. Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, have a nice evening.
You too. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Also to the number 0997, can you at least give me your name, address, and email that we can contact you?
Hi,
Okay,
can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes.
Hi.
Oh, hey, how you doing? It's Ryan Holiday, and I'm right next to the end of the street here at 2768 Swan Way.
Okay.
I'm
Sorry,
sorry, what-
I'm out running around. I just couldn't get to a computer.
that's totally fair. I'm sorry, I missed your address number.
2768 Swan Way.
Okay, and do you have a good email address? I have your phone number, obviously, but do you have a good email address that we
It's
can?
yeah, it's RHOLLIDAY 2727 @gmail.com.
Okay.
So to reiterate, it's your first initial, your last name,
Yep.
2727 @gmail.com.
Yes.
All right. All right. Thank you for that information.
All right. Thank you. You guys have a great evening.
You too. Happy holidays.
I'll take care.
Thank you.
All right. And is there any other comments from you guys that you would like to have addressed?
I don't, other than trying to figure out ways to address that runoff on abandonment area 5A. There, I'm sure maybe we can expand the current bio pond or do French drain or berm or something. David, do you have an opinion on that?
Well, I think the engineers need to look at it. Your road comes down, I'm talking about 5B now. That seemed to be the last concern. Your road comes down right between that and their property. I'm not sure how much water is going to flow across your gravel road over to them. I'm not, and it's pretty flat there. So I don't even know that it's a concern. Yeah, right where the red line is, right?
Yeah.
That's where the driveway comes. So I'm not so sure that a lot of this area 5B isn't contained on that side of the gravel drive, honestly.
And actually the slope of the ground is underneath that line. It flows to the south because there's a little crest that is in that wooded area that you know, only about 10 feet kind of flows toward the gravel drive. The rest of it goes down, you know, south into the property. So
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Now,
I mean, we can also include more of this like at a separate time. If there's no other community comments, I'm gonna end this call
Okay.
and then we can also go through a separate meeting to understand how we want to be addressing these runoff issues. All right.
okay, yeah, it's being recorded. I understand.
Frank, I might give you a call if that's okay.
Sounds good.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, and have a good night.
You too.
Okay.